All right, away you go. Thanks, Mark.
Cool. So let me check my clicker's working. Brilliant, right. Yeah, so I'm going to talk to you today about how we have moved to using a block-based editor in WordPress before Gutenberg was a thing. And there's been a little bit as well about how we're going to try and move that towards using Gutenberg as well. Obviously, because it's very, very imminent. Has anybody not heard of Gutenberg before we start with anything? Good, hope we have. It's quite a hot topic at the moment. So, my name's Mark. I am a founder of a WordPress agency called High Rise Digital, and I'm at WP Mark on Twitter. If you'd like to follow me, that would be lovely. So, first of all, this talk is going to talk about an alternative approach. This is not to say that we don't like Gutenberg. It has issues, yes, but it's not something that we're saying don't use. It just wasn't right for us when we started this journey. So we ended up going in a different direction. But that's what this talk's going to be about. We will use Gutenberg, definitely, but it just wasn't right at the point in our journey when we decided we needed to allow our clients to use a block-based editor or an editor that allowed you to add blocks as such. So just a little bit of a caveat. I don't want you to think that we're anti-Gutenberg. So how did this all come about in our journey? Well, we've noticed over the last few years that designs have changed, as they would. And we get designs. We're not actually design agencies. We don't do much design ourselves at all. Our ideal client is get a design, build this in WordPress. And the designs we received changed a lot over the last sort of 5 or 6 years. And the designs we're receiving now are becoming more and more challenging to enable customers to be able to keep editing the content of their websites. And more to the point, make that easy and intuitive, so you don't have to edit things in 14 different places to make it work. And because of designs have changed, things have got a little bit more tricky. And it led us to this approach, thinking, how can we make this easier? How can we actually help the clients to make the editing experience a lot easier? So let's have a look at a typical sort of design that we might have received 3 or 4 years ago. We probably wouldn't have received this one because it's the Facebook News blog site. I think this is actually on WordPress.com. And this was kind of your traditional design that most websites kind of look like back in the day. Not that long ago, actually. And as you can see, it's got a header. So the header is usually where the logo goes. It usually have a menu in there, possibly some sharing stuff maybe. But most sites had some sort of a header with a menu in it, and that's what they look like. Most sites had this block of content where you could put images, you could put links, but usually it was just a block of text, lists and things like that. It was the main body of the article. And in this case, it's no different. It's got a heading, it's got the published date, etc. Often they had a sidebar. It doesn't have to be on the right, it doesn't have to be on the left. Sometimes it doesn't actually have to be at the side. But they'd have this idea or concept of a sidebar that displays on the site. In this case, it's got like the latest categories, so you can click and view news from particular categories. It could have a list of authors in it, you name it. There's lots of examples. But essentially, it has a sidebar somewhere on the page. And then at the bottom, we've got the footer. So this usually has often a menu again, and some sort of copyright information, that sort of stuff. So that's what an old design kind of looked like. This is a more modern design that we've been working on recently, and these were the designs that we received from the designer. So can we build these in WordPress? And as you can see, some of those concepts have disappeared. So we do have some sort of a header up here. It changes on every page. So this hero section at the top, and we've got different images coming in. Some have a different layout, some have a video behind them, etc. We've still got a menu, we've still got the logo idea, so that's all kind of the same. And then we've got a footer, which you can probably say is similar. This has got some sort of menus in sort of columns, and some themes have that in sort of widgetized footer areas where you can drop a widget in and it displays it in a column view. But this bit in the middle is where it changes. This is actually a snippet of this design. There's more of these down the page. I've cut it up so you can see it on the slide. But we've got these sort of sections going across the page with an image and some text and a call to action button, etc. This is another page from the same design. This has got some videos, it's got some a post grid at the bottom here. Obviously these would be like featured images when they get actually displayed out on the site. So this is another page. So, whoops. So these pages are kind of built up of blocks of content. We can see them across the page. I've highlighted one in green and one in red. And I suppose this is what Gutenberg is trying to solve, in that we can build pages of these blocks and output these blocks on the site. And here's the other page. You could say there's 3 blocks here. You've got one at the top. This is the same type of block. Obviously, it's just reversed where the image goes on the right rather than the left. And then we've got the content grid at the bottom again. So those are the sort of blocks of the page. Gone mental, this. So what is the problem with that with WordPress? Excuse me. So if we go back to the old design, or the older design, we had things in WordPress that we could use to build this design. So at the header there, we've got a beautiful menu system in WordPress that allows us to build lovely menus. They can be nested. We can assign them to different locations within the theme. We can add custom links to them. We can do all sorts with them. There's even plugins where you can turn them into mega menus and do all sorts of things. So we've got a really good menu system. Brilliant. We've got somewhere in the WordPress admin to edit that. This content block on the left, we've got a WYSIWYG editor. It does exactly that. It allows us to put images in. It allows us to put text in, links, videos with embeds, all that sort of stuff. It really works quite well. Sidebars, we've got widgetized areas in WordPress that can do that. These are just the default widgets, like categories that lists all your categories. And similarly with the footer, we can use widgets and menus and things to make that content editable. So WordPress worked really well for this design because it gave us the tools in the back end to allow clients to edit that content quite easily. Excuse me. But how do we do this sort of layout? It becomes a bit more difficult. How do we allow someone to do that, this image left or right, buttons, titles, how do we allow to do that in this editor? It's not very easy, and people have tried and tried and tried to make it work. Some successfully, some not so successfully. But we just don't have the options in here. It's brilliant for that first design. It does exactly what it says. It gets your text in there, you can put images, etc. But you can't really do those dynamic sort of layouts, which you've got more design scope on them, shall we say. So, many have tried, as I've said. So let's have a look at some of the attempted solutions that people have tried to make it work. Oops. I'm going to give up that thing. So the first one is the good old shortcode. So I'm sure you've all seen shortcodes. They work like this, so they're not as big as that in the editor, but yeah, just to prove the point. But they're in square brackets, and there's usually a string of text in square brackets. And what happens is when you save your post and you view that on the front end of the post, that gets replaced with some dynamic content. So a popular one might be that you'd have one that says like tweets, and then you'd like be tweets equals like 4, username equals WP Mark, and it would show 4 tweets from the username of WP Mark. That's kind of an option that's been used quite a lot to try and get those dynamic layouts in there. But they're just not very good. I mean, you're writing something, you need to know exactly how to write it. You don't have any visuals to see what you're writing. You know, how many parameters does this thing take? There's nothing on the screen to tell me that it's even available, that I can add this to the page. If you know about it, that's great. If you don't, you don't. Some plugins add buttons where it says add media. So you can click a button and then it'll drop this code into the page for you, which is good, it's better, but it's not perfect. It's been tried to be solved, so I don't know if anyone's ever used this plugin called Shortcake, and it tries to provide a user interface for shortcodes. So it allows a bit more of a GUI interface so that users can add shortcodes without having to type things in. And it's quite good actually. It gives you a screen like this. So next to the add media button, there's a button that says, I think it's add post element. You click on that and then it pops up, and then any shortcodes that are available that have been registered with this plugin, it puts a button on the screen and says which one do you want to add. So this is like a quote shortcode that gives you like a little quote or testimonial. So you click on the button, so yeah, I want to add a testimonial, and then you get this screen, and you just get boxes to enter information in. So this is like the quote itself, what do you want the quote to be, and then you've got the source of the quote at the bottom there. And then I think somewhere it's just not on this button, there's a button down the bottom that says like add to post. And then what that does is it drops the actual shortcode itself, that string of text, into the editor rather than you having to type it all out. The great thing about this as well is it tries to preview what that will look like on the front end in the editor, so you can actually see what you're going to get on the front end as well. It's not perfect at doing that job, but it's not bad. It's not bad. I've used this plugin to do things like before and after photos in the editor so that you can see them. It works quite well. So that's something that's been tried. Shortcodes, they're very good, but they're not perfect, and they're not very intuitive for users that don't know exactly what they are. If you've never seen them before, then why am I typing this string of text and then on the front end it's turning into this other thing. Page builders. There's lots of them now. Lots of them. These are just a few. So we've got Visual Composer. There's Divi. There's Elementor. I don't know what that one is down the bottom there. But there's quite a few of them out there, page builders. And they've tried to solve this problem of allowing clients to build up the layout of their pages of different components. So, I want to have another row. I want an image here. I want some text here. I want to put a button underneath. And to do that sort of layout that we've been providing. A lot of them are very good. But a lot of them aren't. And a lot of them, they all save their data in a different way. There's no sort of common way that happens, and moving between one page builder and another page builder can often be very difficult. But they are getting better and better and better all the time, which has got to be good. Now, we've tried some of these as an agency. We've looked at some of these and tried some out, but they have some fundamental problems that we just couldn't get past. The main one is that they just provide too many options for the clients. There's just too many things that they can control. They can control the margins and the padding on everything. They can control the colours on everything. And actually, that's not what we want to allow the clients to do. They should be responsible for editing, adding their content, and the site should do the rest, essentially. Because otherwise, they just become the designer. What's the point in paying for a beautiful design when you can just break it in 2 seconds flat by changing some values that you shouldn't be able to change? So it comes very hard to create a website that sticks to the website's design principles, the brand guidelines, because people just want to experiment too much. And most of these page builders have that out of the box. Some are better than others. Some you can turn things on and off and give control, but they're not. They just give too many options for our liking. And I suppose that brings on to the latest solution, which is the Gutenberg project itself, which is going to be launched extremely soon. Is it the 27th of November, something like that? Something? I'm not sure. It should, well, yeah, as of today. But we'll see. We'll see when it comes. It's certainly not going to be long, I don't think, anymore. That it's going to be probably imminently. If it's not just before Christmas, it'll probably just after Christmas. But it's coming very shortly. I'm sure that everyone's got mixed opinions of what Gutenberg's like. I've used it. Parts of it I think are really good. Parts of it I think are not so good. Parts of it I think are really good for developing. Parts of it I think are not really good for developing. But it's coming. It's going to stay, and I'm sure that it will be a success in time, which is good for us all. But as an agency, it had some problems to start with that meant we really couldn't use it. So 12 months ago when we started on, well, probably 18 months ago when we started on this journey of trying to allow clients to create these block-based sites, it wasn't really ready. It had been started, it was out there, you could have a play with it, but it was just too much in its infancy. It's written in a completely different language than I know. So it's all written in JavaScript. I do use JavaScript, but it's not really what I do. So I'd have to learn all that and React and things, which was difficult. And it suffers some of the problems that the page builders suffer. You've got lots of options for things. So I don't know if you've used it, but if you had a paragraph, you can change the background color, you can set a drop cap on it, you can change the font size. And yes, I'm sure you can take those things away from it. But again, as a developer who doesn't know JavaScript very well, that was really difficult for me. So we made the decision early on that at this point in time, we couldn't go forward with using Gutenberg, and we needed to look for something else to try and help our clients make these sort of sites easy to manage. So that brings us on to our solution, the solution we found to try and make this work. And it's a very common solution that probably most of you have seen if you've not used it yourself. So if you've not used the plugin called Advanced Custom Fields, then this is a plugin that allows, relatively straightforward actually, users to create different admin screens to allow users to enter data that can get output on the front end in a much more straightforward fashion. So for example, if you've got a post that is about a person and it's displaying like a profile information, you could quite easily create an edit screen where they just have a box to put their name in, they have a box to put their job title in, their company, their email address, their contact details, a short bio, and the back end screen is really easy to create, and it's nice and easy for the users to understand how to do that. But there was one particular feature of Advanced Custom Fields that we took advantage of in the Pro version, which is actually a paid-for version. It's not very much, I think it's about $25 for a license, and it's called the Flexible Content field. Now this field actually allows us to build these block-based systems that Gutenberg's trying to do. And you can kind of get an idea from what it's doing with this little screenshot here. So on sites that use this, clients, when they want to add some content, they basically click this button. You can change the label on this button, by the way, it doesn't have to say add row. So I think ours says add content or add block or something like that. And then you get a choice of which types of content that you want to add. And these we'll create using this plugin. So I think the one in the example that you saw on the designs where we've got the image, the text and the button, we call that like a feature row. So when the client wants to add one, they click add content and it would say feature row. They click that and then they get a screen that appears on some fields that appear on their screen like a form with all the right fields to add that content in for that particular type. So the flexible content field allows us to create these different blocks and allow the users to choose which ones they want to add to a page at a certain point in time. So this is an example of what the back end could look like for a series of blocks. So each of these blocks with the dark coloured headings is a flexible content field. It's a block in Gutenberg's sense as such. And as you can see from the little animated GIF, you can drag them up and down. You can reorder them just like you can in Gutenberg, and you can add the different content in. So it brings an element of layout building, or I suppose page building, to WordPress. And we think this is a nice, easy to use user interface for clients to be able to manage their content. So you can see we've got the add block button here is what we've labelled it. And we used this for a few months. And it got to the point where we're thinking, we're just doing the same thing here over again. Each client wants the same sort of blocks. So this is ridiculous. We're writing the same pieces of code for this client, and for this client. So what we needed to do was to standardize this and to try and make it so that it was more portable from one project to the next. It would save us time, it would save therefore the clients money because we didn't have to keep redoing things. And that was something we did when we built this plugin called ICF Blocks. So this is something that we now use on most of our sites. So we didn't want to have to do this every time. We thought what we'll do is we'll build a plugin and we can add this to the sites that require this sort of layout. So it works alongside Advanced Custom Fields. Obviously you need that installed and activated for it to work properly, or for it to work at all. And the idea here was that we'd have a suite of blocks to be able to use on any client site. So if client X comes along and says, well, I want to have this sort of block, we might already have one that almost fits the bill, in which case we could use that and change it slightly. Or it might be that we had a new one and then we could make that available to everyone else, or we could have that available in our suite to use on other projects in the future. But what was really important is we were trying to save time, trying to make the code base that we used all the time more consistent so that we were being a bit more efficient in our development. So the actual blocks plugin at the moment has, I think these are all of the blocks we have. I might have missed some off. So we've got a block that allows you to add a form. It uses gravity form, so you need that active, obviously. We've got one called like recent content, which means you can display like the latest 5 posts from the post type, or you could display posts, 5, 10 posts from this category, and so on. Feature row you've seen, documents, so you can have like a list of PDF documents. Often clients want to do that, or a list of Word documents or whatever they want to add. Accordion, good for FAQs, things like that. A pricing block that allows us to do like a pricing table of different features or products, if you like. A content block, probably really badly named, but essentially that's just like a WYSIWYG box that you can use like the normal content. A hero box or block, so that allows you to either add one hero section, and that could be like an image with some a description over the top and a title, and that's a repeating block as well, so you can add more than one hero and it'll turn it into like a slider. Although why you want a slider, I don't know, but there you go. And then we've got other ones, you can see them on there. So like I said, some of them have repeating blocks inside them. So is there a call to action on there? Yes, so call to action, you can either have one or you can have more than one, and the front end will sort of behave appropriately as it does that. So this is an example of one of our blocks. So this is the content block, nice and simple one to show you. Each block has some like what we call default fields. So we can turn them off, on and off for each block we want to do. And our default fields are essentially a block title, because most blocks on a page want some sort of title outputted to somewhere, and a block introduction. This one doesn't have the introduction, which is just like a paragraph of a text input that you can add some stuff to, because obviously it is a WYSIWYG itself, so you could just put that in there. And they all have this option at the bottom for a custom class. This one is, as I said, it's a content block, and you can see you can add another column if you want to here. So what this does is just repeats this further down the page, and then on the front end we can turn that into a column-based layout. And we can set a maximum number of columns that they want to allow as well. So we can say you're only allowed to have 3 columns, or 4 columns, or 2 columns, or 1 column if you want, and then that would be grayed out so they can't click it. And then each block also has some an options tab. So we split it into a content and an options. Content, maybe there could be a better label than that, but essentially that's the stuff that you get seen on the front end. Options are the things that they can sort of change for this particular block. So most blocks, and again, we can turn these on and off on a per client basis using our plugin. So most blocks allow them to have a background color, so they can set a background for the whole block across the page. They could use a background image. And then we added this option on the right hand side, so if they choose a dark colour, obviously we can't have dark text on a dark colour, so we need to be able to a way of inverting that text. And there are sort of PHP libraries you can use to detect what colour it is on the back end and then do that. But we found this was a good way of doing it. Tick a box and then it'll add a class to the block we can then use to sort of do something and maybe change the colour of it. And each block has the option for a custom class. So if you want to do something a bit different with the block, you can put a custom class in there and then maybe use the customizer to create a bit of CSS and output that block in a bit of a different way. So that's how that bit works. And like I said, all these can be turned on and off on a per client basis. So it was really important when we started developing this that we wanted to develop it in an extensible way. If you're not sure what that means, it's essentially a code base that we can keep the same, but we can change things on a per client basis without changing the code base of our plugin. So that always stays the same, it's nice and stable. And it means we can update that code base and it's not going to break any sites that's gone onto. So the way in which we make it extensible is we have lots of what we call template overrides. So each of the blocks that you see on the screen, the plugin includes the front end markup for that. So and that is included in the plugin. So, but what we've allowed it to do is that if you include the same file in your theme, it will use that one instead. Just like WooCommerce uses, if you ever use that, you can override its templates by placing them into your theme. And that allows us to then change the markup for a specific client if that's needed for the design that we're achieving with them. So again, we're not breaking the plugin, we're just using the same file, put it in your theme, and you can make some changes to it. All of the fields that make up all of the blocks are all filterable. So they're essentially in a huge array in PHP, and as a developer I can take them out of there and I can push new fields into there. So if a client wants to have the call to action block, which has got like a title, an image, a description and a button, if they want to add a second button in, I can do that quite easily. Either in a plugin or in the theme functions file, I can easily add a field into there. And then we could use the template overrides to put the template into the theme and actually output that extra field. So it's nice and extensible. There's lots of actions and filters, so each of the templates allows us to put content before and after the different places. We've got classes that are all filterable, so that we can add extra classes to things if we want to do them to style and things like that. And based on classes, there's lots of helper classes. So where we've got a call to action block, the class will be outputted with how many there are. So is there 1, is there 5, is there 2? So we can use that to style things in different layouts. And there's classes such as if they've added a background colour, a class gets added like has background colour. If there's a background image and a class gets added that says has background image, so that we can use those classes to style the different blocks based on the options that the client has chosen in the back end. So it was really important that we built it extensibly. It isn't perfect. By no means is it perfect, and we did face some challenges when we were building this. I want to just cover a few of those quickly now. So the first one was the actual back-end interface. It isn't perfect. This is advanced custom fields, flexible content without us doing anything to it. And this is with all the fields collapsed, so you click on these to expand them and it'll show you the fields inside them. But it's not very easy to see where your content is on the front end. So obviously this is a content block. Which paragraph on the front end is inside that block? Well, it's at the top, so it's probably going to be the first. So it's not that easy to see where your content is. So we tried to make some improvements to that. It is a lot better than this, which is a site we actually got an inquiry about, and they were saying, we need some help, we can't edit our content. Well, I'm not surprised. I think that's Visual Composer, I think. But yeah, where is the content? It's somewhere in there. But anyway, it's better than that. So what did we do to try and improve this? We styled the headings so they were dark, and we found that really helped visually see the differences in the different fields. Just stood out from the rest of the admin a little bit. You'll notice we also added an additional title on them. So we've got content, which is the block name, and then the block title called welcome is what we've put next to it. So you can see which section you're in on the page from the front end. That's a bit nicer as well. Heroes are usually used first, so we didn't bother with those. That's why it's always obvious where they are. That's probably not the best screenshot actually, because you'd be better seeing one that's a bit bigger with more of them. But it just meant we could make it look a bit nicer, and it's easy to find the different sections. Other things that are a problem is that obviously Advanced Custom Fields saves everything as post meta. It's not saved into the content of your post in the database. So as far as the world is concerned, there's no content for all your posts. It doesn't have any. It's all in metadata. Why is that a problem? Well, it's not searchable by default in WordPress. WordPress doesn't search metadata by default. There are solutions for that. There are plugins that help you do that, but it's not perfect because it's not searchable. Other problems with that is that if you use Yoast SEO, and let's face it, probably everyone in the room does, Yoast can't analyze your content on the page because it isn't in the content of the post, and that's what Yoast tries to do. It tries to look at the content that you've written in that WYSIWYG editor and analyze it, and it can't do that. And again, someone I think's released a plugin that would help you do that. We've tried it, it's a bit flaky, so that's a bit of a problem. And the last one is reusable blocks. Gutenberg does this very, very well. If you've ever used Gutenberg, you can save a block and then you can use it in multiple places. That's really good. And if you change the block once, it changes it everywhere. So that's quite nice. And clients did want that feature. We've actually built that into our plugin now, and it works really well. We've been trying it with the design that you just saw before, which was good. And it's working so far so good. So they can create a block and then they can use it in all the other places on the website. And then if you change it in the place where they created it, it'll change everywhere. So that's been good. But I wouldn't say it's been fully tested yet, but it is working. And then this kind of brings me on to the future, and the next part of our journey with this plugin is that, again, I'm not a JavaScript developer, so I can't sort of jump that barrier of being able to develop Gutenberg blocks at the moment. And the great team at ICF have built tools into Advanced Custom Fields that allows you to pretty much create fields than you used to in ICF and make them available as a block in Gutenberg. And this is something that I was actually looking at on the train coming up yesterday, and it's actually really good. You don't need to know any JavaScript. You can write a bit of PHP, not a lot, and it will create your block as a Gutenberg block, which then has the benefits of being in the post content and that sort of stuff. So this is something that's coming soon. It's still in beta actually at the moment in the Advanced Custom Fields plugin. I think they're up to beta 2 now with this, so obviously it's getting iterated on as we come. Whether they'll launch as WordPress launches and make this available, I don't know, but it will obviously be out soon. There is a blog post on there if you want to read it. I think there's a couple now, actually there's been an update to that one with some new developments in it. So that's going to be our next project. It's going to be converting our plugin that we have now so that it will work in Gutenberg as well. The best thing would be to try and use the same plugin we've got and make all the blocks available in both. As I said, I had a quick play with that and I'm not sure we're going to be able to do it. I won't go into the technical reasons why, but certainly we're going to look at building another different one that uses Gutenberg, and then we can have 2 alternatives for clients to use, whether they want to use the Gutenberg editor or they want to stick with the old system for now. Then it's up to them. And that's kind of me. So as I said, I'm Mark. I'm a WordPress developer. I tend to do more back-end development than front-end at all. If you want to follow me, I am WP Mark on Twitter. And just a little plug at the end. We are currently trying to hire a WordPress developer. So if you're interested in a remote role, then come have a word with me or visit that URL. Thank you.